do this twice because I'm gonna try to say y'all, and I don't know if it's gonna sound
if it's gonna work.
Not a planned y'all.
I love a planned y'all.
Welcome to Sustainable in the City, where Nashville sustainability champions take the spotlight. Join Urban Green Lab and Zero Waste Nashville as we dive deep into the stories of everyday Nashvillians. We'll chat with your neighbors, coworkers, and fellow community members about the small sustainable actions that are making a big impact on Nashville. From reducing waste to planting trees, our guests will share their stories about the benefits, barriers, and motivators behind everyday choices. Tune in and be inspired by the power of individual action. This is Sustainable in the City.
Hey y'all, and welcome to Sustainable in the City. My name is Allie Omens. I'm the Zero Waste Program Coordinator for Nashville Waste Services. We are a division of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, and we educate and provide outreach to residents across Nashville to learn how to reduce, reuse, recycle, and compost their waste.
And I am Karissa Hampton. I am the Sustainable Households Manager with Urban Green Lab. We are a Nashville-based nonprofit that teaches communities to live sustainably. Last episode, we actually left off with our guest Ivan's tip, which was to just bring up sustainability and talk to people around you about composting in a really natural way. I know that I have been talking to my friends a little bit more about composting and even got a surprise text from my best friend asking how she could get a compost bin, whether that be curbside or just backyard composting. So I take that as a win. Allie, how have you been doing with that?
I love that. I love that you got a surprise text about composting. That's the best text to receive. And hopefully you listened to our last episode. If not, please go take a listen. It's Compost in the City, and we were talking about composting. And I mentioned that I was talking to my mom about her composting program and the experiences that she's had. And now I want to flip it and give my dad a little bit of a shout out on the podcast because he was feeling a little bit left out that my mom was being mentioned. And I had a really interesting conversation with him about how he's experienced composting and whether or not he's enjoyed doing the composting program. And it made me think a lot about Ivan's story that you can have one person in the household that's really enthusiastic about doing a sustainable behavior and then have other people in the household that may not be immediately on board. So important to learn about all those stories and collect all of them. And yeah, gotta give a shout out to both parents on the podcast.
Yeah.
This episode on Sustainable in the City, we are talking about repair. And if you are not familiar with the webinar format of Sustainable in the City, we talked with Ryan and Bailey from Nashville Public Library's Donaldson branch about the Repair Fair program, where they host events where people can bring all sorts of things that are broken, and they have awesome volunteers from the Nashville community that are there to fix things. And we have one of the fixers on from the Repair Fair. If you want to learn more about the Repair Fair program, you can watch our Sustainable in the City webinar episode on our YouTube playlist. We'll link that resource in the show notes. But for today's episode, we're really focusing on the everyday Nashvillians experience and the experience for all of you in repairing things and what kinds of resources exist out there for you to fix the things that are broken so that you don't have to throw them away or have to buy new things.
Yeah, and so we have a special guest today, someone who is on the ground doing the fixing. And so I'm very, very excited to introduce you guys to Blake Mohler. We have him here with us today.
Hello, everybody.
Blake, can you start us off with your sustainability journey? How did you get here to Nashville and kind of what made you start to care about sustainability?
So I was born in a small farming community in Indiana, and that's really where this whole thing started about trying to fix things. Farmers certainly have an attitude of self-sustainability, of pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. And if your car breaks down or you get a flat tire or something in the city, I suppose you just go to the mechanic and try to get it fixed there. But if you're out in the field and it's the middle of harvest season and something happens to a piece of equipment, you have to have the know-how, the tools, the parts to fix it right then and there and keep going, because you could be in the middle of nowhere and there's not necessarily anybody that's going to be able to come and fix that. So my dad was always fixing stuff around the house, always had a workbench, always had tools, and I saw time and time again him working to to fix things instead of throwing them away. It was certainly modeled to me, in my house growing up. But the other big part of it is I think it's just curiosity about how things work. If you are even remotely curious about how something works, when it breaks or stops working properly, you may start to wonder why. And if you're wondering why, then you start to wonder if, well, could I maybe fix this? Is there some way to learn how to fix it? And then it becomes its own kind of challenge to try to fix things that are broken. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but the quality of merchandise, if you will, has steadily decreased over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years. I remember my mom had a vacuum cleaner that was given to her as a wedding gift when my parents got married, and it worked for like 20, 25 years. It broke finally when I was a teenager, and then she kept buying new ones and they kept breaking, and she had to get a new one year after year after year. Dad couldn't fix those because things are also not made to be easily fixed nowadays either. So yeah, I think that maybe that kind of answers your question. How I ended up in Nashville, that was the other part of the question. Well, why do we all end up here? A lot of us to do music. So I always dreamed of being a musician, and my wife and I were in a band in the late 2010s, and we did the thing. We toured. People learned our songs, sang them back to us. It was really cool. And when that kind of ran its course, then I became a producer. And so I work in the studio now with artists, help them record their music and do artist development and fix stuff in my free time.
Awesome.
It's incredible. I love what you mentioned about curiosity, and that can we pause when something breaks and think, why did that break? Or how might that work on the inside? And often we just move so quickly that we can just go right past that and say, I need this now. Let me just go buy the new thing. I'm now curious if you can help us define what fixing is, like bring us back to basics. What does it mean to fix things?
Well, I suppose to define what it means to fix something, first we got to define what does it mean to break something. So, I suppose usually when I think about fixing things, I of course think probably more about like electronics. Then that's probably a good place to start. There's some people that are really good at woodworking. That's not me. If you saw my woodworking abilities, you would certainly question my ability to do anything in life. My wife is really good at like sewing and doing things like that. Also not my expertise. My expertise is like the really nerdy, nitty gritty. Like if you start talking about resistors and capacitors, I get really excited. So in my mind, when something breaks, something electronically on the inside is no longer like functioning in the sequence. Most electronic items start with power in and then some kind of function at the very end of that, which is what we want that device to do. If it's a vacuum cleaner, we want the compressor to turn on and for it to suck up air. So when something breaks, probably it's like a puzzle. There's some component in there that is no longer functioning properly. And if you can figure out how to isolate it, hypothetically, you can replace it, and then you can get that device to get back to its primary function. Now, I have never been particularly worried about cosmetics. So it's very possible when I fix something, it will look a whole lot worse by the time I'm done with it. But if it works again, in my mind, that's a victory.
And some might say worse. Others might say looks more unique, looks more personal.
A little bit of personality.
Exactly. Think about, you mentioned your wife is interested in sewing and maybe the textile fixing. Think about the trend of visual mending, or visible mending rather, that we can embrace the imperfections in our clothing when our jeans get a rip and we're going to sew a cool patch on top instead of trying to hide its tear.
What's that really cool, I can't think of the name of it, the really cool Japanese art where when ceramics break, instead of trying to repair it with like clear glue, they will repair it with like sparkly gold adhesives. And so it creates it into its own unique work of art. You can see where the cracks were, but that they've put it back together.
Our executive producer is going to search
She's
that
Googling.
now.
Yeah.
She's going to find us an answer. But I have heard of what you're talking about, and that's exactly
Just
you
embracing it. Yeah.
You could apply it between, and like you mentioned, you talked about it with electronics. Let's see. I think we have an answer here.
I'm going to guess that's pronounced kintsugi, but I don't know. But it is a traditional Japanese art form that involves repairing broken pottery with gold-dusted lacquer.
Very cool.
That's cool.
And it does exist.
Yeah,
It's not the kind of thing where you're thinking of something.
Make it up.
Yeah, I'm just envisioning just like a mosaic.
Yes, very similar. Yeah.
So, what common items do you find are most often discarded but can easily be fixed?
Well, if we go by what I have seen at the repair fairs, which is probably my best anecdotal view into things that break a lot that can actually be fixed and don't need to be thrown out. Lots of lamps, lots of simple electronics. There are some advanced electronics there's a I'm trying so hard not to get too nerdy here, but surface mount components. There are some things that are really hard to repair without super specialized tools, but there are some things that are pretty simple, like a light bulb and a switch. And we have fixed a ton of broken lamps. And when I say broken, it's not that they were cosmetically broken, they just didn't turn on when you put a new bulb in there. Mm-hmm. We fixed tons of those, lots of bikes, which is a really great sustainable form of transportation. I'm a pretty avid road cyclist, so I have fixed tons of bikes that have come in, and all just little things. Nothing that was too major, but takes a little bit of courage, a little bit of know-how, a little bit of experience, to fix. We've had some people bring in some pretty advanced electronic devices like gaming consoles, things like that. And that is, unless it's a software issue, those things are harder to repair. There are some people that specialize in that. And I think the lesson to learn there is that pretty much anything can be repaired with enough know-how and enough gumption. It just depends on if you can learn or you have the skills, or it's cheaper to have something fixed than buy a new one, which is where things get really hard in the sustainability, arena, because a lot of times it's cheaper just to buy something new than to pay to get it fixed.
And how did you learn your skills for fixing?
I guess it must have started with my dad and at home. My brother and I were in 4-H, which is sort of like, Cub Scouts or Girl Scouts or those kinds of programs where you take on projects where usually you build something or you do something, and you go to the club meetings for it. And so I think it really started with building things from scratch before it started with trying to fix things that were already broken. So we built model rockets. We did model cars. I think one year I tried to do a model airplane. It never flew. So
that's okay.
But I think that's where it started learning how to use a soldering iron, learning how to glue things together, learning how to clamp things together, learning how things work together from their basic components. I think the analogy that would be easiest to keep coming back to is it's like a puzzle. Anytime you're fixing anything that has multiple components like that are all supposed to work together. And then at some point I shifted into really getting into music and music gear and really nice music stuff, especially, 20 years ago was really expensive. The price on some of that's come down now. So the only way to get your hands on good stuff back then was to buy stuff that was really beat up or might be broken or might need a little TLC. To get it back up to playing or music making condition again. And that's where the big motivation came for me, because I wanted to make rock and roll music, but I didn't have enough money to do it. So it was how do I do this? How can I afford to do this? And so I bought all kinds of really janky stuff and managed to cobble it together and make it work. So maybe that's the third component here that we haven't talked about, is motivation to learn to fix something. How did I learn to fix music gear? The College of YouTube. I think not to get too meta, but going meta is my favorite thing in the world. So here we go. Hang on.
Do it.
Hang on tight. Civilization as we know it.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, you really were.
I thought about this on the way over here.
I'm so excited to see where this goes.
Is built on the idea that we can share knowledge and that we can pass it down generationally. And that's how we got here. Right, that's what allowed us to, as humans, to start staying in place, to start building communities, to start building society. And the fact that now, if I have let's say I have a piece of music equipment that's not working properly, I can go on to a forum, I can type in what problem I'm having and click enter, and within seconds, people all over the world can potentially give me answers with their experience. I just really can't quite grasp the magnitude of the amount of information that's available to us that wasn't available 20, 30, 40, 100 years ago. And obviously things have gotten a lot more complicated in terms of things that we're trying to fix, but the information's out there. And if you just go to Google, you can get a lot of it yourself.
That's great.
Yeah.
I appreciate that you framed it as talking about the motivation, because that's really what we're trying to do here on Sustainable in the City, is highlight the barriers, benefits, and motivators to acting sustainably and reducing waste. So you just spoke to the motivation bit, and love that shout out to all of the information that is available on the internet, because there's so many resources out there. I'm curious if you could speak to some of the barriers that people might experience when you think about maybe it being intimidating to repair or fix things that are broken.
Yeah, sure. And before I do that, if I could, now that I'm thinking about motivation, if I could step
Please.
back to that for just a second.
Yeah.
When I was 15, my motivation, for fixing stuff was obviously a little bit different than it is now. I'm not going to tell you how old I am. That seems, just imagine that I'm really.
You're not 15.
But I'm still really close. Depending on how you like to do math, I'm still really close to 15. Now it has turned into much more of an interest of being a stewardship of our planet. Anytime you throw something away, it's gone. It's gone, and it's probably going to do something negative to the environment. So that has now become a major motivation for me too. I mean, we recycle. So it's more of like, now the motivation is like, oh my gosh, like I don't know if I've said it on the pod yet, but I have a 2-year-old daughter, and like I'd love for there to be a planet for her to inherit someday from us. And not to quote, I've actually heard Gandhi didn't say this recently, but let's just assume he did for now. You got to be the change you want to be. I've kind of like co-opted that and just said, like, if you could just change your life a little bit in a positive way, and maybe like you guys were talking about earlier, if we could just positively impact our own lives and our own footprint and just a few people around us, like, we could really turn this around.
Yeah. Awesome.
So that's my motivation now. Also, still rock and roll too.
Yeah.
Always rock
right.
and roll.
Always.
It's good to highlight that your motivation changes over time, that you can have a motivation at one point in time and it can change. And our guest last episode talking about composting, their motivation might have been that there was a free program out there, and why not try something that's free? And now their motivation has shifted. They talked about the influence of having kids and wanting to leave a better planet for them and all of that. So, you absolutely spoke to a lot of great things there. And Karissa, were you going to say something?
Yeah. So we talked about the motivations and how those have changed, but can we talk a little bit more about the barriers? What might somebody, encounter as a barrier in this field of fixing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever fixed anything right on the first try. Maybe it's a little bit of self-confidence. Maybe it's a little bit of hubris. I think a lot of it is just that curiosity of getting into a project and wanting to finish it, just so you can say, oh, okay, I understand how this works now. And to gain that knowledge, I guess you just have to be like a lifelong student of learning, of trying to figure out how things work. And that is really great motivation to keep going, and will get you around the barriers, the most common barriers I've run into, which are disappointment and failure. Disappointment when you try to fix something and it doesn't ever quite work the same. And then, of course, failure is when you're not able to fix something. So if you have a fear of those kinds of barriers, of failure, of disappointment, of maybe even of wasting time. I know we're all so busy in our modern world. I guess my argument against that would be is if you tried to learn how to do something, especially tried to learn how to do something for yourself, if you tried to learn how to do something to make our world a little bit better of a place, was it really wasted time? I don't think so. And you know what? You might fail the first time, you might fail the first 10 times, but eventually you're going to get it right. If your barrier is you feel like you don't know how to do it, I know I already touched on it, but I can touch on it again. The college of YouTube will take care of you. Would you guys be surprised to hear that I drive an old 1990s Toyota 4Runner that I'm constantly fixing all
Not
the
at all.
time?
Nope.
That's my vibe. Boy, I really need to fix the AC, though. It's getting a little toasty these days. So, every time something kind of goes wrong with that truck, I'm always on YouTube looking up how to fix it. And there's always like some guy in like the deep south of Alabama somewhere who's got one of these. He's like, here, I'll show you how to fix this particular part of it. I feel great because I feel like I've unraveled the mystery a little bit more of how cars actually work. It's not just magic, apparently.
Or so they say.
Or so they say, yeah. I take a lot of joy and pride in knowing that I'm driving around a vehicle that I've put a lot of time and effort into to keep it running, keeps it out of the junkyard. In terms of sustainability, the gas mileage isn't great because it is from the 90s, but we'll just kind of skip over that fact. Hopefully somewhere I've offset the carbon footprint somewhere by keeping it out of the junkyard. I don't remember why we started talking about that.
I hope one of our listeners goes out there and does some sort of life cycle assessment of
yes, please. You can get my email and let me know if I should just go ahead and put this thing in the dump or not. I'd really rather not because it's because I love driving it around so much.
And it has personality, which is
tons of personality. Yeah. Okay. I remember what the question was now, which is a barrier. Every time I need to fix something on that truck, I can go on YouTube and I can find how to do it. And there was probably a time, even in recent human history, where if you wanted to be an expert on something, you had to learn the information and then retain it. But that time has long since passed. Now all you really need to do is know how to get the information. It's about everything is like on demand now, and that includes learning. And there are times where I've actually fixed the same thing or similar things in that truck. But like last time I did it was like 2 years ago, and I don't remember, but I just go online, I find the YouTube video again, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is how I can do it. If you're a visual learner, find YouTube. Find somebody who has got their phone right there and is showing you how to do it. If you like to read and get steps, you can go to forums. The information is out there, and it won't be wasted time. It won't be wasted time, even if you fail or it doesn't go as planned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always found fixing to be so intimidating, especially when my Keurig went out, and I was extremely motivated by getting my coffee in my cup. I needed it. However, I was struggling with how to even open the compartment to see what is going on underneath. I watched YouTube video after YouTube video after YouTube video. Eventually, I was able to open it. And then once I opened it up, I saw inside and I saw that I guess the air compressor was having some issues. And then it was just like, where do I go from here? And so I think that a lot of times people are, want to fix the things, see the videos and things like that, but just kind of get stuck along the process. Do you have any tips or tricks on how to keep going?
Well, if you live in Nashville Metro and the surrounding areas, you can come to the next repair fair and have us take a whack at it. But if you don't, you like that plug? That was good.
Yes.
If you feel like you've reached the point where you can go no further on a repair, I think most of us probably have that one friend who is somewhat like myself who might be interested in helping. And this is actually making me think of all the times I have helped friends fix things because I'm known as that guy in our friend group. I've helped people fix computers, install new computer screens in their Apple, the big Apple desktop computers. I've helped them fix bikes. I've helped them fix things like that. So maybe if you have reached a point where you've taken as far as you can, it's time to reach out to your immediate community and see if somebody else knows how to fix it. Another option is that there are a lot of people who like to purchase broken electronics, fix it themselves, and then resell it for a profit. So Facebook Marketplace is free. You can always list broken stuff on there, and maybe somebody, even if you have to give it away for free, maybe somebody's going to fix it and keep it out of the landfill. That's probably like your last option because obviously you want to fix it and keep using it. Yeah, that's where I would start.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Chris, another thing that comes to mind for me is just starting with something easy. I know in my personal experience repairing, I have never tried repairing any sort of electronic, but I do love, kind of like you said, your wife, Blake, I love textiles and sewing and all of that. So I started out fixing buttons on shirts or other items that the button popped off or the button came loose. And I just get my little thread, my little needle, and of course also have the College of YouTube. But it just seems, at least to me, it seemed like a lower barrier to entry where I could sit there with the button and the thread and I could see all the things that are going on. Maybe with electronics, some people might, I don't know. For me, when I think about repairing electronic, I think, oh, I don't really know exactly how this works. Like you mentioned, it's important to know how the things that we interact with, how they work. And so many of us can get by with the ignorance is bliss of it all. If your car just runs, if it hopefully it runs every day
Mm.
and your washing machine just works. And are we really thinking about what it's doing behind the scenes?
Yeah, and actually that makes me think of something else, especially in thinking about your Keurig, is you would actually be surprised too how many brands do carry replacement parts for things. So another resource may be to call the company of the, especially if it's an electronic item that you're using, describe the issue. Sometimes it's still covered under warranty. Sometimes they'll even honor an out-of-date warranty just in the name of great customer service. And sometimes, like if your compressor is toast on that Keurig, they can send you a new one, and maybe it's really easy to put in. Maybe they have instructions. Not all manufacturers are going to offer that level of service, but I have been surprised in the past about the resources out there and the ease of ability sometimes of getting replacement parts if something's broken.
Awesome. So can you share maybe a memorable or funny story about something you fixed that had a significant impact?
Oh, can I? Before we lived here in Nashville, my wife and I lived in Atlanta for a long time, and I worked for a startup there. This was, this would have been back in like 2012, 2013, fixing iPhones, fixing broken iPhone screens. We had a little shop, and you would bring your broken iPhone in, and we would basically take the old screen off. We could recycle the LCD as long as it wasn't damaged, and then we would put a new screen on for you. It's hard to tell from this podcast, but I have never been cool in my entire life. I've never known like what's cool, what's going on, in like
Except rock and roll.
Except in like 2005, I was like, man, this Kurt Cobain, like Nirvana, I love this. I was like 15 years behind the times. And so a guy comes walking into the store one day to get his iPhone fixed, and he has absolutely shattered it. And I'm going through the testing. I'm just like, hey, good news. Like, the phone's still working. We just got to put a new screen on there. It's like, here, let me make you a customer account. What's your first name? And he leans in and goes, Waka. And it was Atlanta, so like some weird stuff happens sometimes. So I was like, okay. So I typed in Waka. And then he goes, I'm like, and what's your last name? And he goes, Flocka. And I mean, seriously, I had no clue who he was. No clue. I do now. And so I was like, is this guy just messing with me? Like Mr. Flocka? Like, what is this? So I fixed his phone. I got it back to him. And my coworker showed up about 30 minutes later. And I was like, dude, you'll never guess what happened. This really weird guy came in here and told me his name was Waka Flocka. And my coworker's like face like turned white. He's like, the Waka Flocka? And I was like, oh man, I did it again, didn't I? I missed out on a really cool cultural icon moment because I have no clue what's going on in the world. And so he pulled up a picture and I was like, oh yeah, that was him. And then we listened to his music the rest of the afternoon. It was pretty good.
That's great.
So that's about the time I fixed Waka Flocka's iPhone. You
started that out by saying you're not cool. And I think you just proved yourself entirely wrong.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Wow. So I was going to ask about the benefits of repairing things, but maybe the benefit is that you might meet
might be cool people. You never know. Actually, if I could segue that into one of my favorite parts about the Nashville repair fairs, when Bailey was originally telling us about it, it really was a sustainability angle. It was, hey, let's weigh the stuff people are bringing in. Let's see how much we're keeping out of the landfills. And, let's try to make a positive impact on our community and our environment and our planet. And over time, what I found is, yes, we are doing that. But what we're also doing? Folks from the community are coming in and we're getting a chance to talk to them. Bailey said from the beginning, his vision for this was that we wouldn't just fix things. We would fix it with them. We would show them what we were doing. So hopefully, maybe next time something happens, they would feel the confidence to try it themselves. I talked about all the bikes that I fixed. Every time I've done that, I've made sure the person who brought it in was right there with me. And I've been like, okay, here's how I'm adjusting the brakes. Like, here's how I'm airing up the tires. Here's how I'm doing this. Here's how I'm doing this. If this ever happens again, you can totally, trying to give them some confidence. You can totally fix this on your own. And I've had some really amazing conversations with folks while I fixed their things. That has been sort of the surprisingly fun, unique, and really meaningful and rewarding part of doing the repair fairs on top of just fixing stuff.
That's lovely. Yeah. And you mentioned building up people's resources for being able to fix things on their own. Hopefully they keep coming back to the repair fair, but also they can then have the tools to do it on their own and hopefully save some money too by not having to go out and buy a new thing, right?
Yeah. Knock on wood. Nobody has brought back anything. that I have fixed yet.
That's good.
Right.
That's a good sign.
And I
They
would
maybe
be-
even learned how to fix it on their own afterwards
Well,
if
so I'm
something
thinking
were to happen.
there's either there's two really great outcomes here. One is it didn't break again, or number two is it did, and they felt confident enough after watching us do it that they could fix it themselves.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. So how can we better support and encourage the culture of, I guess, fixing and repairing things in Nashville?
Well, I mean, the repair fair has got to be a good start, but we're really, hopefully I'm not getting this wrong, we're really only doing that once a quarter. And, we're doing our best to get around to all of the, the different libraries. We've been to, we've done a couple in Donaldson. I think we're doing one in Green Hills next, and then we did one out in West End. So, we're trying to make the rounds as best as we can. But that's just, that's if people happen to get on Facebook that day and see we're advertising, or they've been to the library and see we're advertising. It's hard to reach everybody in Nashville. So I guess the best thing we could all do is what you guys were talking about when we started this conversation, which is just talking to people about it. It's happened so many times before where I've just been in conversation with somebody and they've been like, oh, my whatever it is broken or not working. I've been like, oh, I kind of like fixing stuff. Could I take a look at that? So maybe we can raise awareness of just the fact that broken things don't have to be thrown away. That's probably the first step, right? Mm-hmm. Broken things don't have to be thrown away. Maybe at least try contacting the manufacturer, at least try listing it for free on Facebook Marketplace to see if anybody wants it to try to fix it. Like there's really easy options just to make sure it doesn't end up in the landfill. But on top of that, then maybe you can make somebody feel brave enough to go ahead and try to repair it themselves. It's already broken. You probably can't make it much worse if it's not, currently not working. Mm-hmm. You might as well open it up and try to learn something.
Yeah.
It's funny that you say that. I was talking to our colleague about having you on the podcast and talking about repair. And she told me the story of fixing her washer at home, her laundry unit, and doing the College of YouTube and all of that. And I wrote it down here. She said, quote, if something's already broken, what's the harm in breaking it more? And that's exactly the attitude is what do you have to lose if it's already broken?
Oh, could I tell you a funny washing machine story?
Please.
Okay. So I can't remember where we were when we had a dryer that stopped working or something like that. You would twist the dial on it and it wouldn't work. And it was a really old model. And I was, I tried to figure out what was wrong with it, but like all the troubleshooting I could find online, none of it was making any sense. And, it reached a point where we really, needed clean clothes. So I gave in and I called the dryer repair person and he came out and he twisted the dial and he said, oh, I know what's wrong with it. And he pulled the dial off and the plastic on the back had broken. So I was just twisting the dial and it wasn't turning the washing machine.
Sometimes it can be as easy as that.
Yeah.
Now we have like a newfangled Samsung washer that's all electronic. But anyway, if your dryer or washing machine is not working and it has a knob on it, you might just pull it off and make sure the plastic on the bag's not broken.
Yeah.
Great tip.
It's always
pro tips.
It's always those tips like, did you try turning it off back on?
With anything
Did you
computer
try
related.
Unplugging and plugging it back in.
Yeah.
That is always the first step. You mentioned the repair fairs and your experience helping people. I'm curious, have you had experiences where people are just super excited that you've fixed the thing that they've brought in? What's that feeling that people have after having something fixed?
Yeah, I mean, we've, not every item has sentimental value, but we have been able to fix some stuff that has sentimental value or has historical importance to them or their family. One thing that I remember in particular was a clock that was not working that we were able to repair and get it working again. And that particular person was really, really excited about it because that clock meant a lot to her and her family. And that's just the icing on the cake. Like we're at the repair fair, like we're all nerds. We just want to fix stuff. Like at the root of it, that's what we're there to do. And obviously through fixing stuff, we want to serve our community better and we want to make, people happy. We want to keep stuff out of the landfills, like I've said over and over again. But when you can do something like that, it really gives you a different perspective on all of the fixing failures you've had. I talked about earlier the frustration and failure and disappointment. Suddenly all that stuff seems worth it when you're like, oh, I just made a difference in somebody's life. Like there's very few things that are as powerful as that.
That's awesome.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I think about the few wins that I've had in my sewing experience and that time when I've tried to do something with the sewing machine and I've not gotten it quite right, because I am by no means an expert. I am still learning myself, and I'm struggling and I'm troubleshooting and all of that. But then when I finally get, like recently I sewed and repaired a zipper on this jumpsuit I have, and I put it on after fixing the zipper and zipped up the zipper, and just that feeling of, oh, I did that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it took me a lot of time. It took me several months of trying it and then getting frustrated, putting it down, trying it, getting frustrated, putting it down. And I think allowing that space of, it might take you a little bit of time to fix something. It might not be an immediate fix, but if it has that sentimental value, like you said, or just has any sort of value personally, that's such a nice feeling once you've done it yourself.
To end on, is there a sustainability tip to share with listeners today?
Not all of us are in a place, we're fortunate enough where if something we use daily or regularly breaks, to go get a new one. So use that as motivation. I think I've said it before, but I'll say it again. If it's already broken, how much worse can you really make it? And maybe it's something that's really easy. Maybe it's something that only takes a screwdriver to fix. So, go get a $10 set of screwdrivers from Ace Hardware or Home Depot or something like that, and open up your Keurig and see if it's something that's really simple. Before you throw something away, just see if there's something simple you can try that you feel like is within your skill set that you could do. And maybe, 90% of the time, that'll be what the problem is. You can fix it. You can keep it out of the landfill. You can save the money of having to buy a new one or the pain of not having coffee in the morning. And you'll feel like you did something nice.
Thank you so much, Blake, for sharing all of your fun stories. So many fun stories about repairing. And I know it's motivated me to go home and look around and see what things I've been neglecting fixing and what things I need to maybe motivate myself to go and consult the College of YouTube on.
Yeah. It makes me want to go through my Goodwill pile to see if there's anything I can fix out of there.
For sure. And it's nice to know that you're a resource here for people in the community. And I imagine there are more people like you out there that are willing and able to help other people in Nashville and repair things. And we're just very thankful that you're here and supporting the community.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Sustainable in the City. Listeners can email us at sitcnashville@gmail.com to reach us. If you have any questions, any people you want to recommend to be guests on the podcast, feel free to reach out. We release episodes on the third Tuesday of every month. So until then, we will see you next time. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Sustainable in the City. Sustainable in the City is produced by Urban Green Lab and Zero Waste Nashville, a division of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, with recording assistance provided by the Nashville Public Library's Studio NPL team. Our theme song is produced by Draped Apes. Subscribe in all the places you listen to podcasts. To learn how to reduce your waste, find Zero Waste Nashville online at zerowaste.nashville.gov. For more tips on how to live sustainably, follow Urban Green Lab on social media at Urban Green Lab or online at urbangreenlab.org. Join us next time for more stories about small sustainable actions that are making a big impact on Nashville.